Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're throwing together the power rankings here today. It's going to be a couple hours later than normal. As usual, I would normally put this up Sunday night before the Sunday nighter game. Yankees and Dodgers are already 5 innings through. The Yankees are up. I was at the Vancouver's Canadians game today with my family, and it went to extra innings, and we saw a nice home team walk-off, so that was super exciting. But guys, I make my promises. I love doing this. I like to get this out, so I am going to try to rip through this. Dinner's on its way, so I might cut this halfway through and then re-edit and etc., so there might be a little jump fun stuff like that. But guys, I am just super excited because I'm finally going to get home back to my studio this week. Our apartment is finally ready. The renovations are ready, so we're no longer in this makeshift studio that I am in. Super excited for that, and I'm going to be able to start doing some more videos, hopefully, especially it's June, so the prediction videos for the playoffs is going to come out. It comes out every year in June, the first one of the season, so I'm going to be excited for that. So if you are new, subscribe to the channel. Looking forward to having you. But guys, we're going to jump into it starting with number 30, and I think we all know who that's going to be. They did hit 50 losses before they even hit 10 wins on the season. Rockies got swept by the Cubs this week, swept by the Mets, both top-tier teams last week on the power rankings. And the pain doesn't seem to be stopping for the Rockies. They also passed the Marlins as the losingest team right now of all active MLB teams. So in win percentage over their entire history as a team, they now have the worst win percentage of any active MLB team. So congrats to the Rockies. You're the worst of the worst right now, and I don't really have much else to add. Number 29, sticking in that same spot. I think they kind of cemented that spot right now. I think they've lost now 21 of 24, something along those lines. 0-2 against Houston, 0-4 against the Blue Jays this weekend, including a couple explosions where they were leading in that Jays series. I'm not sure about Houston, but the pitching for the Athletics has just not been good, and they've been just getting demolished. Offensively, they do have a lot of power. They've been putting up a lot of runs themselves, so they do have moments where they are threatening teams, but no lead is safe on the Athletics, and they are stuck at number 29. At number 28, dropping a few spots, probably coming back down to earth where they might likely stay the rest of the year. We got the Chicago White Sox, 1-2 against the Mets, 0-3 against the Baltimore Orioles, so a 1-5 week. And it wasn't too pretty. They didn't really put up much runs against the Orioles, which for most teams, kind of a concern, right? And the White Sox now are quite far back in this division. Central seems to be a division of 4 teams fighting, possibly making in the playoffs, all 4 of them, and then the White Sox quite a bit up behind. So I think number 28 is fitting them quite well. Moving up, because the White Sox did so poorly, we do have the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Pirates had a pretty okay week, 500 week against the NL West, and they did win a series against Arizona. So a little bit of a bounce back, and again, we're not going to get too excited. The Pirates have been thoroughly disappointing all season long, so we're just going to kind of stick them there at number 27. Number 26, I do have the LA Angels. A lot of debate about whether they should be as low as they are, and they've had some stretches where they've looked like 500 team, and they've had some win streaks that you got to get somewhat excited about. But at the end of the day, the Angels are not going to be competitive in their division. Their division is probably the worst overall in the American League, so that is playing a little bit of a factor in it. And they're far away from being a playoff contender. So all those things kind of coming together. Trout possibly coming back and might make a difference, but overall, I think the Angels are going to be cemented in this bottom row. Next up, 25. I'm going to stick them in the bottom row still. I know they had a winning week, but guys, you sweep the White Sox, it's not going to just bolster you out of the bottom row. They also had another series earlier in the week against St. Louis, and they did fall short in that one. So overall, 4-2 week, and they move up a couple of spots, but more so a lot of the teams ahead of them, it's not really at the point where I can be like the Baltimore Orioles are a better team, because they've just been pretty disastrous most of the season. Number 24, I have the Miami Marlins, and they kind of had an okay week. Nothing really to write home about. They played 2 back-to-back series again against the NL West. 2-4, so a losing week, and it's kind of going to be the status quo when you're in these bottom areas, but not really getting swept in that. I think that's been kind of the story of the Marlins. They haven't really put long stretches of losing together, which is something we at least can bolster unlike some of these other teams in the bottom row. I think that kind of sets them apart from the rest. Number 23, making a case to kind of start moving up this board as teams ahead of them start to falter a little bit. Washington Nationals go 2-1 against Seattle, 2-1 against Arizona. Winning week against two teams that are ahead of them on the board, including a team that was in the top 10 on the board in Seattle. So Washington got to have some excitement. This team is young and exciting, and we see the offense really pop off at times, and we have some good things to be excited about. On the other hand, we hoped their prospects would be a little bit stronger this year. Their farm team in AAA is not doing the best. You would hope, as a team that's kind of in that rebuilding stage, you would hope their AAA team would be doing a little bit better. But if you're a Washington fan, I'd love to hear what you think about that kind of thing. Let me know in the comments below. Number 22. I think they kind of salvaged themselves this weekend because it was starting to look pretty grim, especially with their series with the Jays. They did steal one. I think they only scored 3 runs in that series. Overall, both those teams did not score many runs in that series, but they lose that series. But they managed to bounce back with a win over the hot St. Louis team that everyone's been talking about over the past couple of weeks. And the one thing in that, and those 2 wins in that, was that they scored some runs. And that is something that we have not seen Texas do. They put up 8, they put up 9. Something to be excited about with Texas. Maybe some sort of corner being turned because they need to start putting up runs. The pitching has not been the problem for this team, number 21. A team that does have pitching be the problem. Give the offense of Arizona to Texas and the pitching, and et cetera, et cetera. And you got a really strong ball club. But right now, Arizona's pitching has been giving up runs. And they have been free-falling down this board, and rightfully so. They lose the series to Washington. They lose the series to Pittsburgh this week. Losing the 2 bottom 10 teams, you got to be a little bit concerned with how things are going there. At number 20, Atlanta, they just fall back down. They started to make some headway on this board, trying to work their way up the board, and they were doing so, and they were starting to put some wins together after such an atrocious April that they did have. But things are starting to just not work again. 1-2 against Philly, 1-2 against Boston, losing against 2 teams that are vying for playoffs, especially in their division when they're trying to make up some ground in that. They're not really going to catch Phillies or Mets, it appears at this rate. Wild card is going to be their best case. But they're going to have to start making wins off the teams that aren't super elite in the American League like Boston, and they just didn't do that yet. Sure, they've suffered a lot of injuries. Maybe these guys coming back, they're not really been able to put it all together yet. But time is going to quickly go by if they don't figure it out. Number 19, we have the Cincinnati Reds kind of just sticking in that same spot. 2-1 against Kansas City, and then 1-2 against the Cubs. Not winning their division, not winning against the top teams in their division kind of continues to be the story with Cincinnati. It's till they start winning in their division, it's going to be really hard for them to start moving up this board because you got 3 teams above you that do tend to beat you, let alone win in other aspects of across the baseball league. So coming 4th in the National League Central is not going to be good enough to win and come into the playoffs. So that's kind of what's been holding Cincinnati back. Offensively, we do see it sometimes, but on other times, it's just not happening for them. That brings us to number 18, the Boston Red Sox. Boston started the week off getting swept by the Brewers, and it seemed like the season that was getting away from them was getting away even quicker. Lucky for them, they tried to turn the corner a little bit this weekend, winning the series against Atlanta, but 2-1. It's not really going to make up the ground for an earlier week, so it's still a losing week. It hurts even more because the rest of the teams in this division had pretty good weeks, and that includes the Baltimore Orioles, who had a winning rate. So out of all the 5 teams, Boston had the worst week in the American League, and they just seem to not be able to put much together, and it's a lot of concern for Boston. It doesn't seem like they're on their way to the playoffs. Number 17, the Brewers, they had such a good week, it forced me to dress the way I did. 6 wins this week, 6-0. They swept Boston, what we just talked about. And then this weekend, they swept the Philadelphia Phillies. It took a little bit of heat last week for having the Phillies at number 1, and rightfully so. You guys were right. They probably aren't there right now, of course. But the Brewers, really, the offense just came alive this week, especially against these Phillies. Really saw parts of this team that we saw the previous few years. The run differential definitely starting to skyrocket north of 0. And there's some little bit more excitement of all the teams that have dropped down this board. Like the Brewers, they're the first team that really had a nice bounce back week, and I like to see it. Number 16, arguably kind of on the fence at this point in the middle of the board. The Kansas City Royals have not really put together too much lately. It's another losing week for them. 1-2 against Cincinnati, 1-2 against Detroit, and that was some really tight games against Detroit. So that's kind of what made me hold on to where they are now. But they're slowly falling behind in this AL Central. Solid in fourth right now, and at the end of the day, I don't think 4 teams are going to make it in this division, so that's not going to be good enough. Royals are going to have to find tap into something they had going last year in order to start climbing back up this board. Number 15 seems like it might have finally stopped for the Padres, but they were bleeding loss after loss for a few weeks now. It just was not good. Of all the teams that were in the top 10 for as long as they were, they managed to put together a lot of different losing streaks of 3 games or more. The Padres did have a winning week, and if anything, playing the Marlins, playing the Pirates are going to be a possibility to get right. They didn't sweep either of them, 2-1 in all of them, so I didn't really put a lot of weight into it because a lot of teams have been beating up on those kind of teams, and you expect it. So Padres, let's see what you can do. Can you build on this, or are you going to keep falling down the board? Number 14. Every time I move them down the board, they start to win. Every time I start moving them up the board, it all falls apart. So I'm not going to get too optimistic here, but the Jays are starting to come together, maybe. They did sweep the Athletics this weekend, 4-0. I'm not going to put a lot of weight into the Athletics. Have looked really atrocious. We already touched on that. They beat Texas Rangers, another team that just has not had it this season. And before the Athletics series, they had only scored 6 runs in 6 games. So there's a lot of concern on the offense. We saw Virgil go down this week as well. Hopefully the pitching that the A's gave them got the bats going, but I'd like to see a little bit more. They could very easily fall right back into this row if it just doesn't stick around. Number 13, dropping a few spots. The Guardians are out of the top 2 rows, and it's on the back of a losing series against the Dodgers and a win against the Angels. So 500 week, but to me it's just not good enough to stay in that top 2 rows because the rest of the teams are just looking a little bit better to me. I know I take a lot of heat. Don't think the Guardians are as high as they should be. But they've had a little bit of an iffy May. May was not their best month, and to me that was more of a month of what I would expect from this team. And if they keep that kind of month going, I think they're pretty much a middling team. So that's kind of where they're trending towards. Number 12 might have got back to where they needed to be after that win streak, and things are starting to fall back maybe a little bit back to earth. They had a losing week after, 3 or 4 weeks in a row of just winning, losing to Tampa Bay, losing as well to Seattle. So 2 teams now that we haven't talked about yet, but Minnesota, it's 1 week. They had a lot of winning going on before. They've looked good on the most part, so I'm not going to use this week too much to gauge them. I'm interested how they bounce back from this kind of week. And number 11. I don't think coming into this year, if you told me I'd ever have them this high on the board, I would have agreed with you, but it's kind of hard not to at this point. They're beating the teams below them. Minnesota is the prime example, winning that series this week, as well as taking 2 out of 4 from Houston. So a split series there. And in the wins, their offense just absolutely exploded. At times, this offense has just poured in runs, and to me, it's come as a pleasant surprise. If you're a Rays fan, it's got to be somewhat of a surprise. Pitching, on the other hand, is not a surprise for this team being able to deliver on that end. And they kept the games that they lost to Houston this weekend close, so a little bit of excitement there as well. Number 10, just talked about them, split with the Tampa Bay Rays. They kind of just stick in that same spot. They do win the series as well earlier in the week. It's only 2 games against the Athletics. So overall, 4-2 week, a nice solid week for Houston. But at the same time, against the teams that are catching them now, like Tampa, they're not always looking super good. They do definitely have their flaws as an organization and as a team right now. I think when we talk about this second row here, none of these teams are going to be without flaws. And even if we get to the top 4, 5, 6, every team really has some flaws. At the end of the day, I think we're going to have 1 or 2 teams above 600 by the end of the season, so we got to keep that in mind. Number 9, we do have the St. Louis Cardinals dropping 1 spot. beating Baltimore to start the week, and then losing to Texas. So I'm not going to read anything into that series. They gave up a lot of runs in the losses. Didn't really score runs, but it's 2 games. And at the same time, St. Louis so far has shown that they are capable of putting together solid performances. So one series, I talk about it all the time, does not really reflect much in this. Sometimes I use it to weigh teams against each other when they're close. But the Cardinals have been on such a run, and they still put together a 500 week, so they're still a top 10 team as of now. Number 8. I think you could argue that this team's starting to trend a little bit further down. Some people might have them a little bit lower. I'm going to give them a little bit because I did like how they kind of bounced back this weekend against Miami. We saw their pitching really deliver, shut Miami down 2-1 in that. But to start the week, they did get swept against top team Detroit Tigers. And right now, that's kind of, I think, always been my concern is whether San Francisco is going to be able to hang with the big dogs in the National League West. Maybe not the Dodgers at this point, but right now, other than that, I guess the guys that I typically would have thought were big dogs aren't really barking the way they would have used to. So they're kind of sitting there. I think San Francisco's on the borderline of being able to make their argument that if they don't start going on a little bit of a run like we saw earlier, they are definitely susceptible to falling. Number 7. Seattle moves up a few spots here, maybe on the backs of the series against Minnesota is really what weighed it in for me. Winning that series, I liked to see it. Losing to Washington to start the week, it sucks. Washington has been one of those teams, though, that has just shown up and played very good baseball against other teams. So 500 week for Seattle. Overall, I think the West is getting a little tight. It's becoming a 2-horse race, and this is just me leaning into Seattle at this point. At number 6, pretty much had to eat my own words. It's just a quick drop from number 1 last week at the Philadelphia Phillies. So Phillies that had a number 1, a little bit of that last week was about me predicting that they would continue their run. They were on a hot run. Sure, a lot of people pointed out in their comments, and it's right, that they were playing a lot of the weaker opponents. I kind of thought they solved their issues and that they were going to come out and figure it out. Maybe I make that mistake every single year, and I'm punished for it by looking a little bad by dropping them down to 6, but when it happens, it happens. I have to be a man of integrity when it comes to the power rankings, and that's where I think they belong. 0-3 against Milwaukee kind of set the tone for going there. Winning the series against Atlanta, I was still kind of confident that they were on their way. I would have expected a number 1 team to continue and at least take 2 games from Milwaukee based on where I had Milwaukee on the board. So to get swept there, kind of, my hands were tied. I didn't really have anywhere else to put them. And as people know, if you've watched this channel enough on the power rankings, a little bit of predictability goes into this, a little bit of me forecasting how I think they're going. And that was just a big miss on that one. Number 5. Pretty much move up because of the Phillies. I know they have a big matchup this coming week as well against Detroit. So I'm really excited. I think that's the weekend series. That's going to be a really fun one to keep an eye on, especially when the power rankings, they sweep Colorado to start the week. It's kind of like status quo for top 5, right? And then they win a series against Cincinnati, which I like to see. Right now, Chicago, I think, has the biggest gap of any other team on this board, other than the Yankees, actually, when it comes to division. But Cubs are kind of on their way, and they're doing well. And people would say you could probably argue a different spot in the top 5. They're definitely top 5, but different spot is arguable. I just think they're a little bit further behind. Number 4. I do have the New York Mets kind of just hanging on to that spot. 2-1 against the White Sox, 3-0 against Colorado. So the White Sox series, if you watched it closely, was a little iffy at times, and they squeaked out a win or 2 there. But Colorado coming in and dominant. Like, it's the same old story. Colorado 50 losses for 10 wins, right? So the Mets kind of weak. They can't really gauge too much on. Looking forward to next week. I know they have 4 games. What do I have here? They have a Dodgers series, a 4-game set against the Dodgers coming up this week. That's going to mean a lot when it comes to whether they can stay in the top 4. Maybe they move up. Maybe they fall down, depending on how that series goes. Number 3, I have the Detroit Tigers. You guys have been calling for it. They've been too low. And I've kind of been hesitant, but my hands are tied. Like, the rest of the teams just haven't been as strong. Detroit, the wins have not been pretty, but at the end of the day, they have been wins. And they don't care how you win them, as long as you win them. And that's the case. 3-0 against San Fran. That pretty much sealed the deal for me. They had to move up into a top 3 role. And then 2-1 against Kansas City. Very tight series, though. Kansas City could have went either way. If they lost the series, probably would have still been a top 3 team. Detroit, a lot of you guys probably think they should be higher. But at number 2, I do have the New York Yankees trying to salvage a win tonight. It was the 7th or 8th inning when I just took a look there, and they were still up. So trying to avoid the sweep against the Dodgers this weekend. They did sweep the Angels earlier in the week, so a 4-2 week overall. Going and visiting LA. Got to be pretty excited if that's the case, coming in on a nice road trip to the West Coast. So the Yankees, they are what they are. It was interesting. Max Fried, I thought, was going to be a big part of that Dodgers series. Ended up being the game they got blown out the most. But I still think the Yankees are in a position where their division is out of a state where they're I shouldn't say though, they should walk away with it at this point, just based on how things have looked so far. And kind of setting up the tone for a great playoff run. And at number 1, it's a little bit of an absence, and maybe I should never have dropped them, because it was basically feels like it's inevitable that they're just going to end up back there every time. Like, every season I drop them down at one point or another, and they always end up back there. So maybe I should just stick them up there all season long. 2-1 against Cleveland, 2-1 against the Yankees. We're going to assume overall the bats just... they can't be matched in this league, and it seems like that's going to be a big part of what it's going to come down to. And we're going to see some pitching that delivers and manages to get World Series things done. So, guys, let me know what you guys think. Just threw this together. It's late last minute and all that fun stuff. Trying to pack quickly, trying to move out, all that fun stuff. So I appreciate it if you guys made this far. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment and below. Subscribe, all that fun stuff. We'll see you for that next video.